Welcome! If you're studying for your A-level psychology exam, you've come to the right place. Today, we're diving deep into a really critical topic, cultural bias. We're going to get you totally exam ready on how culture really shapes our whole understanding of human behavior.
Okay, here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with psychology's big mission, then we'll get into a major stumbling block, ethnocentrism. After that, we'll look at a different way of thinking called cultural relativism, evaluate the whole debate, which is key for your analysis marks, and then we'll wrap up by looking at where psychology might be heading.
So this is the big one, isn't it? The central question we're tackling today. It's a core debate in psychology and something you absolutely need to get your head around for paper 3. Does a theory that was developed in the US work just as well in, say, Japan? Let's dig in and find out.
Right then. First section. At its very heart, psychology is on this mission, this quest, to discover fundamental truths about human behavior. Truths that should apply to every single one of us, no matter where we live or what our background is.
And this goal has a name, universality. But, and this is a huge but, there's a catch. So much of the psychological research we rely on was done in Western societies, and the findings were then just kind of generalized to the rest of the world. And that right there is where a massive problem called cultural bias starts to creep in.
So what is the big deal with this universal approach? Well, it very often leads to something called ethnocentrism.
Okay, this is a super important term for your AO1 marks, so make sure you've got it down. Ethnocentrism is basically when we see our own cultural way of doing things as the right way or the default way, and then we judge everybody else against that one standard.
And here we have the perfect example of this problem in action. A theory created in one specific place, the USA, gets treated like a gold standard for the whole world. We're going to look at a classic study that I'm sure you know, Mary Ainsworth's strange situation.
Now this is where it gets really fascinating, because the test just completely misinterpreted behaviors that were perfectly normal in other places. So German parenting often encourages independence, which meant infants didn't show tons of distress. In Japan, mothers and infants are almost never apart, so the separation was, you can imagine, absolutely terrifying for them. But because Ainsworth's whole test was based on American norms, it ended up incorrectly labeling these totally healthy attachment styles as insecure.
And it's not just a theory. When a researcher named Takahashi tried to actually replicate the study in Japan, the whole procedure was so stressful for the infants, because of their different cultural upbringing, that it often had to be stopped halfway through. That's pretty powerful evidence that the method itself was culturally biased from the start.
Okay, so if being ethnocentric is the problem, what on earth is the solution? Well, let's switch gears and look at a totally different perspective, cultural relativism.
This slide just lays out that crucial difference perfectly. On one side, you've got ethnocentrism, judging everyone else by your rules. But on the other, you have cultural relativism, and that's all about understanding behavior from the inside out. It accepts that there is no single normal. What's normal totally depends on the cultural context you're in.
And this way of thinking has massive real-world implications, especially for mental health. Think about it. A behavior that a Western diagnostic manual, like the DSM, might label as a symptom of schizophrenia could be seen as a really positive spiritual connection in another culture. Slapping a Western label on that could lead to a really serious misdiagnosis.
And this meta-analysis, well, the data speaks for itself, doesn't it? Van Eisendorn and Kroonenberg just proved the point beautifully. Just look at the numbers for Germany, a much higher percentage of avoidant kids, which lines up with their cultural emphasis on independence. And then look at Japan, way more resistant children, which totally aligns with their cultural norm of constant mother-infant contact. It's a perfect visual of cultural relativism in action.
All right, so now for the really crucial part. How do we evaluate this whole debate? This is absolutely essential for smashing those top AO3 marks in your essays, so let's really dial in here.
So what are the good things to come out of this whole debate? Well, for one, just recognizing cultural bias has definitely made psychology better. It's pushed researchers to find more diverse samples. It's also led to some really important changes, like the DSM-5 now having a tool to help doctors understand a patient's cultural background. And what that means is psychology becomes more valid and way more useful in the real world.
But, and this is a big however, the problem hasn't just disappeared. When we realize how deeply biased some classic studies like Ainsworth's or even Ash's conformity experiments are, it actually makes us question psychology's scientific credibility. And even worse, using these biased ideas can still cause genuine harm through misdiagnosis or negative stereotypes.
A huge piece of this ongoing puzzle is psychology's reliance on what are called weird samples. A frankly staggering amount of research is still based on this tiny, very specific slice of the world's population, and that seriously limits how much we can generalize any of the findings.
So, after all of that, where does that leave us? Where do we go from here? What does the future look like for a psychology that actually wants to understand all humans, not just some of them?
The massive challenge for psychology today is all about finding a balance. How can it keep trying to find those universal truths about human nature, but at the same time acknowledge and respect the incredible diversity of human cultures? That right there is the core tension you need to understand.
And that's the big question that psychologists are still wrestling with today. It's also the perfect kind of critical, thoughtful question to leave in your examiner's mind at the end of an essay.